One more week.
The QB's voice sounded in her head.
One more week, and then you'll be able to take out your rage on an actual opponent instead of stationary rocks and dirt.
One unforeseen side effect of Naruto practicing with the QB's chakra so regularly was that it made it easier for the QB to speak directly into her mind, even when she wasn't enraged or trying to use his chakra. And he'd been using the privilege to give a cynical running commentary on her training and daily activities. While the QB was poor company to put it mildly, after 3 weeks of barely seeing anyone, Naruto was so starved for social contact that even the QB's difficult personality was welcome. At least she had someone to talk to. Naruto's current social isolation was completely self-imposed and she knew it, but she was just so sick of people trying to talk her out of bringing Gaara to justice. Sakura, at least, Naruto believed, should have understood. No matter. Soon Gaara would be dead, the world would be safer, Ino's soul could rest easier, she and Sakura would make up, and then everything would go back to normal. Or at least as normal as things could be with Naruto's first ever friend and savior being dead.
Soon, Brett. Soon.
The QB's voice sounded again. That the QB now seemed capable of actually reading her mind was cause for some concern, but there was nothing she could do about that. Hopefully, after she stopped using his power, he'd go back to being her silent prisoner. Speaking of the QB's power, it was simply incredible. Right now she had reached the point where she could call upon the power without needing to get angry first. It was always there, bubbling just beneath the surface of her skin, within easy reach. When she used it, she felt like she could rip a Jonin apart with her bare hands, and the QB told her she was still only scratching the surface. With his help, not even a Kage would be able to stand against her. Considering that Asuma, a Jonin himself, didn't think that he himself could beat Gaara if he had to, she might need that kind of firepower. The only problem was that she didn't have anyone to spar against, so she had no experience using it in real combat conditions. Asuma had offered to help her with whatever she needed on several more occasions, but Naruto had turned him down. If he knew what she was doing, he'd tell the Hokage, and then who knew what would happen. She was blatantly violating his orders not to experiment with the QB's power without supervision. What Naruto didn't know was that several people already suspected what she was doing, the Hokage among them. There were only a handful of reasons why she would turn down offers of help, to go train on her own. A reason that would help her get the strength needed to face Gaara directly. The thing was that the Hokage, while very worried, was curious himself as to whether she could control that power. Ideally, he'd have wanted Jiraiya to be there to help train her, but he still refused. As it was, he had Tenzo on standby in case his wood release was needed to restrain the QB. Whether Tenzo actually could restrain the QB was still up in the air. The first Hokage could use wood release to restrain a Bijou, but while Tenzo could also use wood release, he was not the first Hokage. But with Naruto training far away from the village, they'd probably have a good chance of mustering a response if things ever got out of hand. And if something went wrong during the finals in the arena of the Chunin exams themselves, well, Hiruzen would be there to personally step in if he needed to. Him and several other high-level ninja. As Naruto is walking over a small bridge, she notices a familiar man with long spiky white hair trying, badly, to seem inconspicuous. Now what's he up to? Naruto wondered.
Ignore him. He's not worth it.
The QB's voice sounded in her head. Naruto ignored the voice and took a closer look. The man seemed to be giggling to himself. Is he? Naruto's jaw dropped in shock and indignant outrage. She sent her hair to wrap around the man's ankles and hurled him into the female public bathhouse he was spying on. First, there was some high-pitched female screaming, but then it was replaced by some male, yet just as high-pitched screams of pain, as many of the women jumped at him and not in a good way. In most other places, this situation would have all the women fleeing from the pervert that had just been dropped into their swimming pool. But this was a ninja village. Many of the women here were kunoichis who were made of sterner stuff and had no problems expressing their anger. It should be noted that Jiraiya isn't actually being overwhelmed here. But as a self-proclaimed super pervert, there was a code. If you were caught, you had to simply take your punishment with your head held high, and any scars received were to be worn with the same pride as those obtained while defending your nation. Unless they tried to cut something that couldn't be grown back. Then all bets were off. Besides, this situation was actually completely according to his brilliant plan. Jiraiya was one of those people who suspected what Naruto was up to, and he wanted to see if she could get angry without immediately falling under the Kyuubi's influence. And Jiraiya was a certified expert in getting females angry. Right now, Jiraiya was aware of Naruto watching the proceedings from the spot he was thrown from, with no small amount of satisfaction on her part. She wasn't trying to hide herself. She didn't need to. In fact, some of Jiraiya's female assailants had sent the girl thumbs up and nods of respect for presenting Jiraiya to them on a silver platter. Also, Jiraiya really didn't like the respectful yet cold attitude she had shown him during the brief interaction they've had thus far. Anger was much better. Jiraiya's experience with the fair part of their species also told him it was better that they think badly of you rather than not think about you at all. That, and of course, there was the continuation of his holy crusade to appreciate the female form to consider. His perving was multi-purpose. When Jiraiya himself decided the women had extracted enough vengeance, he escaped. He made it look a lot harder than it actually was for him so as not to hurt anybody's feelings, and promptly kidnapped a protesting Naruto. He put her back down somewhere where they could talk uninterrupted. "Was that really necessary?" he whined. "That and more. I should probably report this to someone," Naruto said as she glared at him. That, Jiraiya knew, wouldn't do her any good. If he was anyone else, maybe. But Jiraiya was one of the most important ninjas on Konoha's roster. And the sad truth was, Jiraiya would have to do something much worse than what would normally warrant someone getting tossed in jail before any official action would be taken against him. And besides, the Hokage was used to his antics. The only thing she might have done to screw him over was to inform Tsunade of it, and she wasn't here. All the same, Jiraiya adopted his most desperate expression and pleaded, "Please don't." "Do you promise never to do it again?" Jiraiya blinked at this. Would she actually believe him if he made such a promise? Even if she didn't know his reputation, or worse, if she did? That kind of naivete was worrying. Also, he didn't want to damage his relationship with his goddaughter, not that she knew this, by lying to her. "What if I treat you to ramen instead?" "You think you can bribe me?" she said incredulously. Then a grumble sounded from her stomach, and she blushed. "Agreed to pay for every bowel I order, and I'll forget this ever happened." Jiraiya gave a broad grin. Excellent, he thought. All according to plan. Or maybe this wasn't such a good idea after all, Jiraiya thought as Naruto started on her 10th bowl, with no sign of stopping anytime soon. Was she somehow planning to eat her own body weight in ramen? Where was she putting it? How was she not the size of the daimyo's wife? Jiraiya knew several women who would kill to have this girl's metabolism. "Another!" Naruto demanded, and Toichi, the stall's owner, already had one prepared. "Is this a revenge to try and eat me out of my life savings?" Jiraiya thought. Clearly he had underestimated her. Lesson learned, he supposed. Never offered to pay for any all-you-can-eat deal with Naruto Uzumaki. "Don't you think you've had enough?" "I'm a growing girl," she said through a mouthful of ramen. Jiraiya sighed and resigned himself to waiting until Naruto had had enough. At the end, Jiraiya was convinced her stomach could rightfully be classified as a new bloodline trait that defied the laws of physics. "So how is the training for the finals going?" he asked eventually. "Why do you care? You made it clear you wanted nothing to do with me and my wish to bring Gaara to justice." "It's not justice, it's revenge," Jiraiya said. Tomato, tomato. Naruto waved this correction away. "Can you honestly tell me that the world wouldn't be a better place if that thing is dead?" "No, I can't. But can you honestly tell me that the world will become a better place if you kill Gaara in the stadium in front of thousands of people? Especially considering you might not be able to make it look like an accident." "Yes, I can. The world will be a better and safer place if it's dead," she says heatedly. "He kills people for absolutely no reason. Not because he has to or because he has orders or anything, but just because they are there." He deserves to die, and as far as I'm concerned, the more people get to see justice done, the better. Revenge, Jiraiya corrected again. There is a difference, and it's not whether your target actually deserves to die. It's about you. You're not doing this because of all the people Gaara has killed. You're doing this because he killed one specific person. You're doing it based on your own pain. Your claim that he deserves it, even if true, is just an excuse. Naruto looked like she had just swallowed something sour. Fine, you're right, and what of it? Are you going to kill him instead of me? By all means. The Hokage told you why we can't do that, Jiraiya said. He thought he might be able to take Gaara in a fight if he had to, but even he wasn't sure. Gaara simply wasn't a genin in any way except on paper. Jiraiya and Hiruzen both agreed that merely sending Gaara to the Chunin exams had been one huge screw you from the Sand Village. The Sand and Leaf were supposedly allied, but any goodwill that had existed between them had been burned out by this act alone. I've done some research on Gaara, Jiraiya said, getting Naruto's full attention. It seems that Gaara was feared and hated in his own village, kind of like you. Except I didn't go crazy. You also didn't have it nearly as bad. From what I've been able to gather, the 4th Kazekage has been trying and failing to assassinate his own son for years, and only recently stopped. This was when Gaara was merely 8 years old. An 8-year-old has survived in the middle of a ninja village where everyone, including its own Kage, wanted him dead. That's what you're up against, Naruto. I can take him, Naruto said. Because you have a demon of your own? Jiraiya asked, and Naruto froze in her chair. We're not dumb, Naruto. I can control it, Naruto said. I have to. All that you've said just made it even more clear that I'm the only one who can do it. Even if that's true, which I'm far from convinced of, what would happen if two Jinchurikis went full berserk on each other in the middle of Konoha? I know you've been experimenting with the fox's power. Is finesse something that power is even capable of? Naruto glared at a point on the ground. I'm not going to hurt anybody but Gaara. And you think you can prevent Gaara from hurting anybody if he transforms in the middle of Konoha? And what would you have me do? Naruto yelled. I can't do nothing. I'm sorry, but I can't. You say I'm responsible for those caught in the crossfire. What of those that Gaara will kill in the future if nothing is done? Just who is responsible for them? Naruto got up from her chair and bowed. Thank you for the food, Master Jiraiya. Jiraiya almost winced at the respectful form of address. He hated it, especially from her. It was delicious, and then she was gone. Jiraiya sighed heavily and slammed his head onto the food stand in front of him, nearly sending several empty ramen bowls crashing onto the ground. That hadn't gone as planned. There had been several other points he had wanted to raise. The cycle of violence, how she was hurting those closest to her, how she should try and understand why and how Gaara became the way he was before making a decision. It seemed he had pushed too hard too fast. He would continue to try in the future though. Naruto, meanwhile, focused on one aspect of that conversation in particular. The Hokage likely knew what she was doing, and notably, wasn't trying to stop her. She chose to interpret that as him giving his tentative approval. That was one source of guilt eliminated from her mind. The tentative approval meant that she could now ask Asuma for help. This boiled down to him observing her use of the Kyuubi's chakra and giving his opinion. Sparring with him proved difficult, since if she just used enough of the Kyuubi's power, she could overwhelm even him. But only in a straight-up brawl, Asuma said. Even if you can obtain almost Kage levels of power with this, don't forget that you're still made of flesh and bone. A lucky strike can kill you, even in this form. I know you've got some regenerative abilities if you use this, but I'd rather not discover the limits of that. Don't get overconfident, got it? And don't forget that this isn't your power, it's the Kyuubi's. As I understand it, you only have this easy of a time of it because he allows it, for whatever reason. I'll be blunt, I don't trust that demon. And neither should you. What a Kyuubi can give you, he can take away just as easily. I understand, but I don't have a choice. This is the only way. Once Gaara is dead, I won't have a reason for ever using it again. I hope that's true, Naruto. I really do. But somehow, I doubt it. And with that, we will slowly be concluding the last interlude chapter between the prelims and the finals. To give another brief overview for those we didn't focus on, Sasuke still learns the Chidori. His taijutsu isn't as good as his canon counterparts, since he hasn't made a specific concentrated effort to imitate Lee's style with his Sharingan. He has still gotten a lot stronger in the month of training, just not quite as good as his canon self. Sakura practices with Kurenai to further develop her genjutsu strategy, and tries to find a way to make it useful even to someone who will see it coming, like Hinata. Speaking of Hinata, she practices with Ibisu, dipping her feet into the fields of medical ninjutsu and elemental transformation. Both of these things will require a lot more than a single month for her to get any battlefield benefits out of it. She's just not a genius like Sasuke or Naruto who can both master the elements in a single month if they set their mind to it. All the same, it's not like Hinata doesn't want to win her next match. It's just that she doesn't consider Sakura enough of a threat to warrant focusing on short-term game projects. Tenten is splitting her time between helping Sakura, so she'll have a better chance at avenging Neji, and preparing for her own fight. Kiba is also trying to help out Sakura, and that basically boils down to him being a test dummy for Sakura to try her tricks on. Neji, meanwhile, is currently in a dark hole of depression. His fatalistic deterministic philosophy has been proven right by Hinata, and it most certainly doesn't feel like a victory. Lastly, Tamari quietly raises the concern with her superior Baki that having Gaara fight another demon child might derail the plan. What if he loses? To be honest, I fear the Kazekage may be hoping for exactly that. What? Gaara's purpose is to attract as much attention, do as much damage, and draw as much enemy fire as possible when the invasion starts. Unless the Leaf Jinchuriki can control her demon perfectly, a battle between those two might fulfill that purpose just as well if not better than if Gaara was unchallenged. And if Gaara were to die at the end, all the better. Honestly, a part of Tamari had expected that answer. Even her own village despised Gaara and wanted him to die. Getting the Leaf to do it, hopefully at great cost, would be ideal for them. And yet, for all that I know that Gaara is a monster, he remains my little brother. Tamari thinks. Was this really how it all had to end? And that's where we're going to leave things for now. Next time, we start the first round of the finals. Nikes out.